Just a second. All right, fantastic. It's all good. Okay. So let me do a mute. Everyone's so well behaved today. Wow. Never saw a group of Jews that have nothing to say like this. Okay.
You know what? Say to ask your doctor reminds me of every time you see something, they say, ask your rabbi. You know?
Well, they're asking their rabbi and they're getting an answer. I don't mean to be, what do they call, pushing the envelope or passing the buck? I don't know what you call it, but yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, good Shabbos to everyone. L'chaim. To anyone that has a l'chaim. L'chaim, everyone. We should have a blessed Shabbos, an inspired Shabbos, which is, for that to happen, that requires every one of us to step up and make it a blessed, inspiring Shabbos. No one can or will do that for you. That's the way life works. So my blessing to all of us is that with Hashem should give us any assistance that every one of us may need as an individual, and we should have a blessed and inspired Shabbos. And if a little shot helps you get there, so be it. I'm only saying a little shot, Beryl. I didn't say 5 shots. L'chaim, l'chaim. All right, so some of you may have seen, I actually gave a title to today's talk. And the title is, Join the Character Revolution. I've said this 1,000 times without saying these words, but I never gave it a formal title. But you know, join the character revolution. What we need today more than anything else, and what we always needed actually, and this is really what Hasidus is about, and this is really what a Rebbe is about. It is about getting every single Jew to create a character revolution. And I'm sorry, but it doesn't mean to create a character revolution in other people. It means to create a character revolution in yourself. Because as we all know here already, that the way you create a character revolution in others is by creating a character revolution in yourself, and then you become an inspiration, and then you become a source of influence on other people. So as yesterday was the Rebbe's yahrzeit, and on the heels of that, I want to share something I shared at our Farbrengen, and we had a little Farbrengen in my house as well that I shared it with some of our young adults in the community. The Alter Rebbe, when he was imprisoned, the first Rebbe in 1798, he was imprisoned for 53 days. And when he was imprisoned, he had a trial. And during the trial, they asked him a number of questions. I believe, this may be inaccurate, but I believe that the trial had 2 segments to it. There was an oral questioning, and then there was a written questioning. And I think this is part of the written questioning, but I may have gotten this wrong. But regardless, the authorities asked him, what is the whole point of having a tzaddik? Why do the Jewish people need a guy who, like a Rebbe? Why do you need a Rebbe? Oh, you're a Rebbe. You're better than everyone else. You're higher than everyone else. And this question actually is the question of this week's Torah portion. Korach asked Moshe, Lama tisnasu al kahal Hashem. Why are you raising yourself up above everyone else? Chabad knows better than anyone else that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. One Jew cannot be more Jewish than another. And because one Jew is very devout and sincerely devout and serves God, and another Jew claims to be an atheist, still one Jew is not more Jewish than the other. He may act more Jewish and he may behave more Jewishly, and that's a good thing. However, he's not inherently more Jewish than another. And that was Korach's complaint. And this was what the Russian authorities, Tsarist Russia government, wanted to know from the Alter Rebbe. What is the idea of a Rebbe? And the Alter Rebbe answered that the purpose of a Rebbe is so that the entire Jewish people have a physical, human example of an individual whose life is entirely dedicated to God, because that goes contrary to normal life. The average person is not entirely consumed with what God wants, as much as we aspire to that, but that's not the way we are, because we are full of biases and agendas and self-interest. It's the way we were designed and created. But the Hashem gives us a tzaddik so we can see a person who unbelievably lives and dedicates themselves entirely to God in the most unbelievable and selfless way. And then that serves as an inspiration and an example for us to be able to step up and say, I need to get closer to this. We may not get to it, we won't get to it actually, but we'll get closer to it, and that's what Hashem wants from us. Because we can't be thriving Jews, and we can't even be thriving human beings without aspiring in this direction. So that is the character revolution. The character revolution is a revolution of doing things which are not out of self-interest. And one of the easiest ways of doing this practically is I can be a person of self-interest, but I can still remind myself, hey, you're making this decision out of self-interest. Make the other decision, even though it's not the decision I necessarily want to make, but I still make it because it is the right thing to do. And I've told myself I'm aspiring to be a person who's going to live less out of self-interest. That creates a revolution in our own life. And then the people that are very immediate to our life, which are usually our family members, they see that and they may even question it. And if we have some honesty, we'll tell them that I really didn't want to make that decision. I wanted to go the other way. But I made a commitment to as much as I can to doing things which are the true thing to do and the right thing to do, and not the thing which is going to benefit me. So here's a fascinating thing that we encounter in our Torah portion, which teaches us a lot about character, making a character evolution. Moshe, who was the tzaddik of the Jewish people, he was 20 years old, according to many opinions, when he was in Egypt, and he kills an Egyptian who is beating up a Jew. And the next day he sees two Jews fighting, and one picks up his hand to hit his friend. Just picks up his hand. He didn't hit him. He only picked up his hand to hit him. And Moshe says, Rasha, a wicked one, just for picking up his hand. Why are you going to hit your friend? And so these two guys, the guy who picked up his hand says to Moshe, what, are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? And Moshe knew in that moment that the fact that he killed the Egyptian was known. And he also knew from the way this guy said it, there's hostility now between him and Moshe. And in fact, this guy went and snitched on Moshe. Paro wanted to kill Moshe, even though Moshe was raised in the palace. And Moshe had to run away for his life. That's the story the Torah tells us. Moshe runs away to Midian, to a foreign land, away from his family and his people. And how long does he stay there for? For 40 years. Actually, for 60 years. Because Moshe was 80 years old when he took the Jews out of Egypt. So when Moshe comes back to Egypt, during the year of the plagues, he's 80 years old. So he was away for 60 years, from the age of 20 until the age of 80. That's a whole life, right? That was actually half of his life. He lived 120 years. A half of his life he was away. What type of a feeling do you think Moshe had when he walked into a room and these two guys were there? I'm just trying to put you in his shoes as I try to put myself in Moshe's shoes. I know when I walk into a room and there are certain people are in the room, my whole emotional state changes. I won't tell you who those people are, but that's the reality. There are certain people that when you see them in a room, you change because you have a history with them. There are issues, there are conflicts, or in the positive. Some people I walk into a room and I beam when I see them. But in the negative, imagine two people almost had you killed. That's who these two people were. The Torah doesn't tell us their names, although many of you may know their names. The Torah tells us that when the Jews left, when Moshe takes the Jews out of Egypt, he finds out 4/5 of the Jews die in the plague of darkness. Right? Moshe takes 1/5 of the Jews out of Egypt, about 3 million Jews. Who's amongst the 3 million? These two scoundrels. The last two people you would think Moshe would want to see. They're there. They cross the sea. They have matzah, their matzah. Until I think it was the 15th of Iyar, whenever it was, and up to a certain point, they ran out of matzah. They had no food. They complained to Moshe. Moshe says, calls out to God, says, I'm going to send you manna from heaven. Don't worry about it. Every day you're going to get your food for that day. And so God gives Moshe instructions to tell the Jewish people, never stock your refrigerator. Tomorrow you're going to get your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The order is coming. We deliver on time every single day. Nothing to worry about. So the Jews get instructions. Manna falls the next day. Unbelievable. Imagine. Pizza pie falls from heaven, right? And the instructions on the box are, don't leave any in your refrigerator. Another pie is coming tomorrow, right? You see that pie fall from heaven. Whoa. You're not messing with these holy pies. Two people stock their refrigerator. Who? Same two guys. Same two bums. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Then the spies the Jews send spies into Israel. Spies come back. They give out a report. The Jews get all scared. They all say, oh, we can't conquer Israel. Two guys say, Nitna Rosh v'Nashuva Mitzrayim. Let's appoint a new leader and go back to Egypt. Two people. You don't have to guess who these two guys are. Moshe's got a history with these guys. These guys walk into a room and you and I are the leader, boy. It's a mess. We may fall apart emotionally completely, right? They say one word and boom, they hit our buttons and we explode. We say all the wrong things, right? Same two guys. In this week's Parsha, we hear their names. Why do we hear their names? Because Korach rebels against Moshe and he says, Moshe, why are you making yourself such a holy leader? We're all holy. Who joins him? Dasan and Aviram, the two troublemakers. Moshe's not even surprised, of course. He's surprised they didn't lead the campaign. He's surprised Korach's leading it, they're only following it. Wow, a bonus. The Maharal says something I repeat many times, because the Rebbe says it as well, but the Maharal was a great mystic that lived about 400 years ago in Prague. If you visit the city of Prague, which I've never done, my brother told me about it, and I know many of you have visited Europe, you'll know about the Maharal. When you take a tour of the Jewish quarter, they tell you about him. He was a great, great mystic, a great scholar, and also a man who created the Golem, which I'm not going to discuss right now. If you know what I'm talking about, it's an unbelievable achievement. And he actually was the inspiration in large part for the writings of the Alter Rebbe and Tanya. A lot of what the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya is based on the Maharal's teachings. And the Maharal says, a great person will always have an equally negative person trying to bring him down. It's a fascinating thing. You know, the Rebbe had someone like that. There was a big rabbi in Israel, and he gave the Rebbe a lot of emotional pain. He decided to oppose the Rebbe. That was, I don't know why he took on that job. It wasn't. I don't think it's an honorable job, but that was the job he took on. Every leader that does stands. I just heard someone actually say that if you're writing things on the internet and you don't have negative comments, you're not making an important statement. And actually, I feel this very strongly that if we don't say something of significance, then we are being very, very neutral and we're not really saying much at all. That's the reality. And I think about this a lot in the messages I share, about whether I'm being whether I'm pandering too much or whether I'm speaking directly enough. It's a very fine balance, because you don't want to water down a message, even just because someone's not going to be happy with it. So how does Moshe deal with them? That's the question. How does Moshe deal with these two guys? So we find that Moshe does something unbelievable. Moshe calls them. The Torah tells us, just a moment, I'm looking at the actual Chumash. So the Chumash says, Vayishlach Moshe Lilkro L'Dasan V'Aviram Vayom L'Lei Naleh. Moshe, you have to understand the great respect. You imagine a man who brought manna from heaven, who split the sea, who brought 10 plagues. The respect the Jews had, despite the fact that they hit moments, low points where they complained. But overall, the Jewish people overall had enormous respect for Moshe. A man who God spoke to at any given moment, the greatest prophet of the Jewish people. He had such stature. And Moshe called for Dasan and Aviram to come to him so that they can try and work this out. And they said, Lo nala, we're not coming. Open chutzpah. And it was an open attack on the leadership of Moshe. Most leaders, they feel that when they are openly attacked, that you feel like it's so weakened by it that you must respond in a very strong way. That's the way most leaders feel, which is wrong, actually, but that's the way most people feel. They told Moshe openly in front of everyone, we're not coming to you. And it defied, because leaders very often feel that they're being weakened by that, which is not really the case. What will weaken them is if they respond from an arrogant place, as opposed to an authentic place. So they don't come, okay? So then the Torah says that Moshe told them to bring fire pans. We're going to make a divine test to see who God really chooses. And then the Torah tells us something astounding. God says, separate from them. He says, Hey, Mishkan Korach v'Dasan v'Aviram. Move yourselves away from the surroundings of Korach, Dasan, and Aviram. It was a group of people. It wasn't just Korach, Dasan, and Aviram, but God points out these names. And what does the Torah tell us right after that? Vayaka Moshe, Vayelech El Dasan v'Aviram. Moshe got up and he went to Dasan and Aviram, which is quite shocking. I asked you to come to me. I'm the leader of the people. You tell me you're not going to come. Okay, fine, I'll swallow that. But I'm going to go to you now. Not only am I going to go to you, God said separate from them, to stay away from them. Not only God already said they are going to be destroyed. Separate from them because they're going to be killed. So the decree took place. God said they're going to be killed. They're a done deal. Why is Moshe going to them? Maybe he's going to try and appease them, to save them, get them to change their mind. It's too late. God already decided, and God said, stay away from them. Here's the reason why. And this defines as a number of stories, which we sort of need to focus on to realize that a number of stories do in the Torah bring out who Moshe was to the Jewish people, who Moshe was as a leader. And what I'm going to use a different word. I'm not trying to insinuate that Moshe was a Hasidic Rebbe, but to understand what a Rebbe is. I will tell you this: if you're uncomfortable with me using the word Rebbe on Moshe, so I will tell you that Rabbi Yosef Ber Soloveitchik, who is the father of what would the right terminology be here? He was the one of the idealistic leaders of modern Orthodoxy. He was a Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva University. He actually referred to Moshe Rabbeinu as a Rebbe in associating Moshe Rabbeinu with the Rebbe, with our Rebbe. So just want to point that out in case anyone's uncomfortable with me using the word Rebbe for Moshe Rabbeinu, that even he did. So, and he wasn't a Hasidic Jew. But he understood, and he used it in a similar story that brings out the uniqueness between a great Torah scholar and a Rebbe. And that's what I want to bring out. Moshe, even though he knew that God was going to kill them and they were going to get punished, and he knew in his mind that's what had to happen. He knew that. But even though his mind knew that, his heart felt for them. His heart felt for two Jews who defied him every single step of the way. And they opposed him personally. They personally attacked him. And they personally attacked his orders. And they threw him off for 60 years of his life. But Moshe, being, as we refer to it, as a shepherd of the Jewish people, or as we can simply say in English, an authentic leader, my flock, I have a responsibility for. And my heart feels for them, even when they are 100% wrong, and even when they are too far gone, and I can no longer save them. But I feel for them. The same way Moshe felt for them when they made the golden calf. Most people after the golden calf, if they were the leader, would say, how in the world am I going to defend this? There's no defensibility. I can't defend this. You did it to yourselves, right? How many people have we said that to? You did it to yourself, right? A guy goes to jail because he did something illegal. You should not have done it. That's how we respond to it. Moshe is telling us a whole different level of response. We always have to feel, even though certain things may need to be done. We always have to feel. He felt for them because he was a leader, and a leader, which is really on this level of a Rebbe of the Jewish people, feels what's going on in the spirit of every single Jew. For those of you who are not going to be in shul tomorrow, ask someone in shul, or maybe I'll repeat it sometime next week. I'm going to share a fascinating story which demonstrates this in the Rebbe's life. There are many, many stories. I just happen to have heard one I never heard before, which really inspired me, where the Rebbe literally knew what was going on in other people. It's a gift. It's a gift. It's a divine gift, and it's part of also someone who achieves mastery in character, in the character revolution. And while we're not trying to achieve mastery, we're trying to achieve this simple point that we learned from Moshe Rabbeinu. And here's one other little point I want to bring out about Dasan and Aviram, in the way we look at every other person. There is one little tidbit I left out for dramatic effect. One little detail that some commentaries say about Dasan and Aviram. Rashi mentions it in the earlier part of the story. You know, a couple of weeks ago, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, in the portion we read that Moshe complained to Hashem, and he said, Hashem, I can't handle the Jewish people are complaining. They want meat. I can't handle it. I can't handle their attacks on me. They're going to kill me. So Hashem said, not a problem. You'll spread your spirit onto 70 elders. That's the foundation of the Sanhedrin, by the way. So he shares his spirit on 70 elders who become elevated by the spirit of Moshe, of prophecy, and they become leaders amongst the Jewish people. Who are these 70 people? These 70 people were the masters that the Egyptians appointed. They took Jews, very similar to what, unfortunately, a lot of our enemies did this. The Nazis did the same thing. They took Jews to be officers over other Jews. So let the Jews fight with the Jews. So they appointed taskmasters, Jewish taskmasters, over their fellow Jews. And the Jewish taskmasters did something unbelievable. When Paro added to their daily load, their daily quota that they had to fill every day of the bricks that they had to make, the taskmasters complained and said, it's impossible. They can't do anymore. The Jewish taskmasters. So the Egyptian taskmasters went back to Paro. Paro said, stop complaining. They have to. So the Jewish taskmasters, the officers, they did not enforce upon the Jews that were under them this requirement. And because they didn't, they got whipped by the Egyptians because they were responsible. And they accepted that punishment so that the Jews under them wouldn't suffer more. Unbelievable thing. An unbelievable thing. To be able to take on a loss, a hurt, a pain, a suffering, whatever it may be, whatever sacrifice there is on behalf of another person, is an unbelievable thing. And guess what? The Torah tells us in the parsha of Shemos, at the very end of the parsha. Give me 1 second here. It says, "Vayifkos Moshe." The taskmasters came to Moshe. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Right, and they complained to Moshe. You're going to Paro to tell Paro to let us out. That's when Paro said, "Oh, you have time to complain. I'm going to add on to their load." They came and they complained to Moshe. So Rashi says, who complained to Moshe? Who complained? Who do you think complained? The classic complainers, Dasan and Aviram. Dasan and Aviram, because Dasan and Aviram were among the Jewish taskmasters who accepted being whipped on behalf of their fellow Jews. These scoundrels, these troublemakers, these bums, these individuals that created a problem every step of the way for Moshe, they took whippings for their fellow Jews. What does this teach us? They were hard criminals, but they were hard. They knew how to take a whipping to spare someone else. What it teaches us is that when we look at a person and we see them as a very faulty person because of choices that they may in fact be. But there is most likely some redeeming element to them. And even though it may not be enough to redeem them entirely, and Dasan and Aviram ended up getting killed in this story, that was the end of it, right? That was the straw that broke the camel's back. But they still had redeeming factor. And Moshe, when he saw these two guys, you know who he saw? He saw Jews who took whippings for other Jews. He didn't see the guys who bothered him, the guys who made him run into exile for 60 years, the individuals who threatened his leadership in so many times. He saw the good in the other person. That doesn't mean he was naive. It doesn't mean he knew to be careful around Dasan and Aviram whenever something was going on. But he knew that there's another side to every person. And we get to choose. And Moshe came and stood up and walked over to them with great humility, because he truly stood with humility before them for that aspect of them. And this teaches us, this really teaches us character, real character. And the character is that we cannot be, we have to rise above. As Moshe is an unbelievable example to us. We have to rise above our self-interest. And at least enough that when someone offends us and we're hurt, that at least we should be willing to go to a third objective party and ask them, give me clarity over here. I'm a mess. I have no clarity on this because right now I hate this guy. But you give me clarity from your objective perspective. That's someone who's pursuing integrity, approaching this in a real way. That is making a character revolution. And when we do, we make our community a much more beautiful place. Our community is a beautiful place. It'll be a much more beautiful place. As every one of us does this a little bit more and a little bit more. This is what, this is really what godliness is about. It's about rising above ourselves and stepping into God's reality. And this is actually what I would describe as redemption. It's redeeming our divine soul from our subjectivity. And this is Mashiach. That's what redemption is. It's an environment when Hashem is going to pervade and we're going to be so aware of Hashem, our own petty nonsense is not going to have any space to exist. So, Al Chaim to all of us as we go into the Shabbos. I would leave you with this question: that tonight, don't wait until tomorrow. You may lose it by tomorrow, but tonight, and maybe even right now, if you're alone and if you're sitting with someone, you can bounce it off them. But to ask yourself, what situation do I have going on in my life? and there's no doubt that every one of us has numerous situations right now going on in our life. It could be our feelings about a certain person, and there are probably numerous people where we have certain feelings and they are a defense mechanism. They're just us looking out for ourselves. And how can I look at that a little bit more objectively and not just looking out for myself? If we do these things once a week, maybe even once a day, but starting once a week, we make this a habit. We become beautiful people. We become beautiful people. And we become an example for others. And people see us. And I'll tell you a little incident I had in my house, and I'm purely sharing this. I want to show you a day-to-day classic example. We had a guy fix our under one of our sinks. Our kitchen gets a lot of use, Baruch Hashem. So under one of our sinks, we had a little leak from the piping. Sometimes I actually dabble with it. I like doing things like that. I like DIY projects, but I wasn't in the mood. So we have a handyman that comes in. He was fixing something else, and he fixed that too. So after he fixed it, a couple of days later, it started leaking. Okay. So I had a plumber coming in to do some real plumbing work, whatever, to switch some of our faucets, which were old and rusty. And so I said, well, he was there. I asked him if he can fix it. So he did. He fixed it. He did a solid job. Solid now. Even my kids will have to work hard to break that one. So it's all good. Now, this handyman came back a few days later, and he was just finishing up whatever he was doing. And Rosie asked me, did you tell him about the sink? So I told her, why should I tell him about the sink? Of what purpose, right? What purpose is there for me to tell him about the sink? So he should feel bad that he didn't do a good job. I should make him feel guilty. The bottom line is I got someone else to fix it, and it's good, right? It's just that thought, right? Of why are we saying something to someone, right? These thoughts, what's triggering that statement? These thoughts are very significant. And when we train ourselves, it's a habit, And believe me, I say a lot of things because I get triggered. Believe me. And some of you know, because you don't have to believe me, I've done it with you. But, we try. This was an easy one. We try, and it becomes a habit, and we become refined people. So, l'chaim, we should learn from Moshe. That's why Hashem gives us a Moshe. We should learn from our Rebbe. That's why Hashem gives us a Rebbe. And we should aspire to become that, not just get excited that they are that. It's not enough. We have to be an embodiment of that. And that's how we create redemption in this world, and that's how Mashiach comes. L'chaim, everyone, and good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, Rabbi.
Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos, good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
And I wanted to say, I'm sorry, I also want to add that we would like to, I had this in mind before I started, so I just want you to know that we dedicate tonight's Torah thoughts to our dear